Welcome to Brilliant Essence Radio. This is Astrid on air, Friday special, Alternate Realities. We've got a very special guest today. I love her to death. Marie D. Jones is going to talk to us about her book, her latest book, The Grid. Here we go. Woo, 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 woo. Hi, everyone. This is Astrid on air with Alternate Realities for an hour with a really special guest. She's one of my favorites. We have had her on the show several times before, written amazing books with her co-author Larry Flaxman. I welcome Marie D. Jones to the show. Marie has an extensive background in metaphysics, cutting-edge science, and the paranormal. She is the best-selling author of 2013, The End of Days, or A New Beginning, and co-author of 1111, The Time Prompt Phenomenon, The Meaning Behind Mysterious Signs, Sequences, and Synchronicities. And she's also been featured on the History Channel's Nostradamus Effect and Ancient Aliens. She's a great radio show guest. She's been on TV. She's been all over the place. I welcome you, Marie D. Jones. Woo! Hello, Marie.
Hello there. Good to be back with you.
I know, these are times where we always catch up, right?
Towards the end of the year, yeah. It's like a routine thing now.
I know. I love it. That's the purpose of the show. We get to catch up with fabulous people like yourself. And I have to say, this latest book, you've written, I don't know how many books. I love the Trinity. There's a few that I really enjoyed, and this one, I have to say, is blows it all away. It's called The Grid, guys. Please visit www.mariedjones.com, MariedJones, mariedjones.com. And you'll find all her, just click on the website and you'll see all the books that she's written, co-authored in most part with Larry Flaxman. And today we're talking about The Grid. Now, how appropriate, right, Marie? We're talking about multiverses, alternate dimensional realities, etc., etc. And here's the perfect book to get a lowdown on really understanding what it's about.
Right.
What got you to launch yourself in such a in such a topic?
Well, probably the fact that all of the books that I had written, well, not all of them, but most of the books that I had written on my own and with Larry, we had been kind of moving towards this concept that we had in our heads that, with all the research that we were doing into parallel universes and other realities and dimensions, that, we don't really understand what reality is, and here we are trying to understand the paranormal or other realities. And so we wanted to try to give a visual image of what we, based on all of our years of research, thought that perhaps the infrastructure of reality might actually look like if it had a physical presence. And we thought of this idea of like a skyscraper with all these different floors representing all the different levels of reality. And there are connectors between those floors. There's different kinds of connectors, different ways that you can access one floor or one reality to the next. And then we just sort of kept getting into it. And the funny thing is The Grid is kind of an introductory book to this concept that we're still working on. We're still developing the grid, and we're still digging into certain aspects of it. But I think it's a really good culmination of where our work was going, while it's also an introduction to where it will probably go from here.
Yep. You have a chapter on the multiple worlds, levels of the grid. Another one, I'm skipping here and there and everywhere. I'm just remembering what I read. But you talk about telepathy and trance and even chemicals to alter your reality and see different aspects of it. It's really interesting, and as always, you always put in a little piece of what goes on in the religious texts in relationship to the definition of our reality and what life is really all about.
Right. Well, I think people thousands of years ago were so much more tuned into what reality was. Just by observing nature, they could see that there was this reality and there were many others, and they had very natural, very organic ways of experiencing.
Well, we're talking about the grid here with Marie D. Jones. So there's a lot of excerpts of the book that I wanted to go through, but let's start with the grid in itself. Now, people go around saying, oh, there's this grid hanging above our heads over the earth. There's also a passage in your book that describes how the ley lines of certain buildings and certain artifacts on the earth are purposefully aligned with planetary constellations or other items on the earth to power up the grid, to use the grid to power up those spaces. What do you make of that?
Well, that's a theory that again, we're going back to a time when our ancestors really understood the as above, so below principle. And they really understood the way that nature worked. There really is a magic and a power and a force that they were tapped into that I think many of us today have just lost contact with because we're so engaged with technology. We have so many things to live our lives for us that we lost touch with that. So I think when you talk about ancient civilizations that were building sacred buildings, whether they were churches or temples or edifices or just monuments of any kind, that they paid attention to the geography in a very sacred way. They paid attention to measurement and ratio and the geometry and spacing out buildings and edifices so that they had a very symbolic yet also a literal, powerful ability to tap into the power of the heavens, the whole as above, so below thing again. We don't do that today. I mean, unless, you're out living in nature where you're really tuned into the cycles, where you really understand what's going on in the cosmos as well as what's going on right under your own feet. I would say the vast majority of us have kind of pretty much lost that ability.
Yeah. It was fascinating reading in another book of yours about frequencies and sonar effects.
Right. Mm-hmm.
How the pyramids could actually be portals, frequency manipulated portals to other planets.
Right. Right. And again, that's that understanding that nothing is solid, that everything comes down to its most fundamental quantum level. We're just a bunch of vibrating particles. There's no solidity. And so, the assumption is that everything is operating on different frequencies. Everything has its own resonance, its own vibrational frequency. And that when we learn about what those frequencies are, when we learn more about how things resonate, we're able to tap into, again, that grid that we are immersed in. Because the grid really isn't something that we can see. We're absolutely immersed in it. It's like a fish in the ocean. You don't really, you're surrounded by it. You're actually a part of it. But one of the ways that we see as a mechanism for working with different realities, for experiencing them, is through vibration and frequency and understanding that there are ways that you can use resonance to do things that seem impossible, but you have to know what those right frequencies are.
Right. I found a web page once with all the different frequencies from the beta, delta, alpha, and all their associations, even linked to body issues. Right. And it's fascinating, just one how one twitch of the radio frequency can do this or that, you know.
Yeah, that's a great analogy to the idea of a radio where you just turn the dial ever so slightly and you start to pick up another station. You turn the dial even more and you've got a very powerful new station with new music or new talk coming in. And I think our brains are just like that. But not only do we receive, we also transmit. I do believe that the frequency and vibrations that we operate on physically through thought, through intention, through emotion, have power, and that we are not just receiving information from the grid, we're also influencing it. We're creating it as we go along with our own vibrational frequencies.
Right. So this kind of aligns with the law of attraction idea, where you put out a certain vibration and you attract or connect and bring back that like vibration.
Right.
How powerful do you think that really is?
I think if people really understood, the problem is people read a little bit about The Secret or the law of attraction and they totally misunderstand what it really means. I mean, there are laws of nature and science that support the idea that what you focus on is what expands in your reality. What you take your attention off of will shrink in your reality. But a lot of people look at that and they think, I want to, focus on $5 or whatever. They don't realize that this is really about how are you vibrating? Are you vibrating on a frequency of lack, of hate, of anger? Are you vibrating on a frequency of illness or health? And understanding that just because you say to yourself, I'm going to change my vibration, that doesn't work. You have to have a force, a power, an energy behind that intention, and that's belief and emotions and, even taking action, because this is a universe that is a combination of, I believe, consciousness and direct action. So it is definitely related to the law of attraction, but with the understanding that you don't just think of something and have it happen. There has to be an incredible amount of your own emotional force behind that thought to get that energy, to get that frequency raised, to get that vibration in alignment with what it is you would like to have, which could be perfect health.
Right. And this is where mass correlation attracts greater mass effects.
Right, it's like a snowball, yeah. It just kind of grows like a snowball.
So the more people watch TV and sit on their couches,
the less they're going to be successful in what they want in life, and
the more TV they'll have.
Well, exactly. And it's so funny because I'm still learning this, and it drives me nuts because I catch myself all the time going back to the saying things like, I'm so sick of this, I'm so sick of being sick, and realizing later that oops, I just pretty much told my body to continue being sick. Right. And how literal our brains take everything. Everything works together in the grid. We're absolutely critical to what reality we end up perceiving. And so everything has to work together. Again, if you're just sitting on your couch and watching TV, like you said, but you want a better life and you want more love in your life or what have you, that's not going to work.
Right.
You've got to work with the energy of the grid. The grid is all about different frequencies and resonances, and if you can, and this is for myself as well, you've got to rise to that vibration rather than staying in the lower one that you don't want. It's like focus on what you want, not more of what you don't want.
Right. I want to go back to two passages. First of all, could you explain to us, you have a passage on bubble universes. Now, that's the first time I heard about bubble universes.
Yeah, and it sounds weird, huh? Sounds like we're in a bubble. But that's part of the parallel universe, multiverse theory, where just sort of giving a visual to trying to imagine other universes that are alongside ours. The way that when a child goes outside and blows bubbles, you can sometimes have a kind of a cluster of bubbles that are all sticking together. I used to love that. Kind of made one big giant bubble. And yet, there are some of those bubble universes that go off on their own. So there's no way to really get information from that one into ours. But if you look at those clusters of bubbles, there are what are known as wormholes or shortcuts through space and time by which something in one bubble can slip into something in another. And we call it information just because that's sort of a really good catchphrase for everything, whether we're talking about energy or entities or what have you.
Right.
So Bubble Universe is just a really cool sort of visual on the multiverse that people can get an idea of how there might be all these bubbles right next to our own big bubble. Some of them are touching and we can communicate back and forth, and some aren't.
They're really, talking about wormholes and all these passages between universes, how, for example, the Sasquatch slipped from this universe this reality to their unseen one. It seems to me that our future is going to be a lot of exploration into what our universe, our cosmic universe holds in terms of connections and passages and wormholes.
Right. Yeah, I agree. I think it's it's science, but I've always felt like science is just nothing more than the way to explain something. And with all of these weird unknown anomalies, whether you want to call it the paranormal or metaphysical, what have you, it's really just science waiting to be laid out for us in a textbook. But there is a science to it. There is a structure. There are rules. We just haven't figured them out yet. And like you said, I think that's where we're going. That's the wave of the future.
Mm-hmm. Now, there's a really interesting passage on the use of chemicals, and you reminded me that animal anesthesia has an out-of-body effect.
Right.
Now, I'm not telling you all to go and get animal anesthesia.
No, don't, please. I know. It was hard to write that chapter because we were kind of like, well, this is one way people travel the grid and have been for a long time, but boy, we don't really want to glamorize any of this.
Yeah, don't go doing stuff like that without...
it would have to be so controlled. But there are natural hallucinogenics and natural substances that, it's hard to talk, that have been used by native tribes and indigenous cultures and even, our ancient ancestors that they knew could get them from one level of the grid to another. And again, we no longer, now we sort of use some of those things, but we abuse them. We use them more to just sort of numb out life, to just make life go numb and to get high or what have you. Whereas before, they were used as ways to experience other realities.
Mm-hmm. And you write in your book, but for those who are not on any kind of drug, these experiences can be triggered, talking about psychic ability, OBE, telekinetic.
Right.
And they can be triggered by the brain and body chemicals themselves if in just the right amounts.
Right. And I think we're learning. I just saw an article the other day on DMT, which, don't ask me to say the whole word because I don't have it in front of me, but DMT is a substance that we have trace amounts of in our bodies that have been used in research to sort of create paranormal experiences. And by that I mean the sensation of presences or angels or religious visions, rapturous visions, the sensation of being watched, shadow figures, things like that. So if we, and that's just one of the substances, that's a tough word for me to say, that we have naturally or that we, our own bodies make, that if in the right amounts or if stimulated at just the right time by something in the environment, could have us seeing an apparition or having an out-of-body experience or what have you.
Mm-hmm. So DMT is dimethyltryptamine.
There you go. That, yeah.
There you go. And it's also known as
I'll let you pronounce it.
and it's also known as the spirit molecule. And I
Right.
think there's a great documentary on Netflix that talks about the DMT. And we have that in our bodies, like you said, and we can...
and animals, too, as well. And, again, there's been a lot of ongoing research with DMT, but just, like I said, a couple of days ago, excuse me, I caught an article where it said that the research with it is intensifying. And I think it's because of our, was the Huffington Post. It says if you haven't heard of DMT yet, you might soon. So there's this real fascination now with finding out how can we sort of rise above this menial life that we've created for ourselves and experience other realities, experience something bigger, sort of expand our awareness and our consciousness.
I personally find that for someone who meditates regularly, they can easily place themselves in highs, if you will, quote unquote, that take them to other to experience other realities.
Absolutely. And the good thing about meditation is it doesn't require any drugs or anything, and that's one of the biggest and best and easiest ways somebody can, as we say, walk the grid.
Right. I'm checking up the chat room here, and there was a question earlier about what you thought about Izon. Let me see if I can find it again.
Is that the comet?
The comet Izon, something about, I lost the question.
Yeah, there's so much conspiracy crap going on with this thing. I mean, I don't know. Let's put it this way. I have no comment at all. It has nothing to do with the grid.
Okay.
But, I've been reading
about
the
grid.
it. I've been hearing that it's supposed to do this and that and the other thing, and of course it hasn't done anything. People say it's an alien craft because it's behaving in ways that a comet or, some sort of natural cosmological asteroid or what have you would behave. But, I always hearken back to my dad, who was a geophysicist and a scientist, and show me the proof. If it hits Earth and we all die, well, there'll be something to it. But no, I just keep seeing a whole bunch of stuff about it. I know people have seen it pass overhead, I believe, but it hasn't done anything. It's not going to. It's not, people have to understand simple geophysics, simple astronomy. For a body to really influence us, it has to be either large enough or come very, very close enough to knock us out of orbit or to deter the Earth's orbit. But that's about all the comment I have. I mean, it's not something that I'm that interested in.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, if you're going to consider something influencing our planet, look at the size of the moon and how close it is.
Right. Right.
That
the sun
influences our planet.
The moon does. But, these things pass through and they move on, and every time something comes along, you've got a bunch of people saying it's the end of the world or, oh, my God, this, that, and the other thing. I've not seen the world end yet, so I don't have real high hopes for this time around. I could be totally wrong. I'm admitting that. But, no, it's just not something that I've put a lot of time and effort into.
Right.
There are enough people doing that I don't need to do that.
So let's go back to our...
I was just going to say, I believe that, Izon came and went without incident. And we need to be moving on to what's going on right here on our planet that needs our attention.
Right. Going back to the more human, down-to-earth concept of the grid, you talk at one point of the human internet.
Right.
And how we're, in the end, you say, in the end, we're all entangled, whether by 6 degrees of separation or just a few strands in the web of all there is. And because of that, we all have the ability to reach out and touch someone without ever laying a hand on them, which is basically what we were initiating the conversation of when we were talking about meditation.
Right.
And you continue, even if it's just with our thoughts and our intentions, which is basically what we do when we meditate.
Right.
It's the human internet,
Larry came up with that description, and I think it's just so easy for people to, hear those words and get a real visual that we're all connected on the particulate, on the quantum level, even though nothing is solid and there's space between everything. There is what is called entanglement, and when particles come in contact with each other, they remain so even long after they're separated by, millions of miles. They continue to influence the spin of the particle that they came in contact with. Well, we're made of particles, so there is an entanglement that occurs on a much grander scale. And so even though much of what is between us is empty space, or so we thought, there is this most fundamental energy, this most fundamental layer of reality. Some people call it the 0 point field. Some people call it quintessence, the source, what have you. The kingdom of heaven, a wonderful way in the Bible that it was described, that it's laid out before us and all around us, and we're actually immersed in it. So I think that we're all connected. We're all influencing each other, even if we never put our hands on each other, because of that web of connectivity that exists on that quantum level.
I'll always remember I think it was my dad who told me, Astrid, remember, if you spit in India, whatever you do in France will have repercussions in India.
Isn't that, boy, does it make you feel like you can't go out of the house and do anything?
You better watch your mouth, right?
Yeah, it's, it really starts to make you think about the influence that you have as a human being, not just on each other, but on the planet as well. And I'm so sick of people saying, oh, we don't influence our planet. We can't be destroying our planet. It's not possible. Well, yeah, it is. And when you have a large number of people doing something, it's even more concerning. But yeah, something that I think one day we're going to be so shocked to find out that every single one of our thoughts had influence on reality. And we're all going to just gasp at, oh my God, all those awful thoughts I had about myself, about life, about other people. And right. I think that's where real enlightenment will come from, even though I myself am nowhere near it. It's just the realization that every single thing we do it's a cause, it has an effect on some level.
Right. That's so, I've gone around my life, sometimes it's like the fear of God, oh my gosh, don't think that way. Don't think, just don't even think that way.
Yeah. It is scary.
It is scary, but at the same time, there's also the phenomena that we tap into thoughts, and so those thoughts aren't necessarily ours, and maybe we're triggered by them to karmically release them or to transform them within our space of energy, It's
right.
Taking responsibility for what information we bring to ourselves and
right.
how we recycle. You have a passage, I remember, you liked the passage on recycling.
Yeah.
You wrote, yeah. I like that. Recycling of energy, of matter, it all transforms. It doesn't, I think you were talking about the death of the body when it goes. It recycles, and that energy goes somewhere, transmutes, transforms itself, and is
right.
still there in another form.
It may not be a human body anymore, but that energy cannot cease to exist. It's going to transform either to a different type of energy, or it will go from one system to another, and those are just simple laws of energy and laws of physics. But it's not going to be in a bodily form, and I think that's where we get tripped up, is that to us, what we want is there to be no death. We don't want to lose our bodies. We want to keep everything in the comfort zone the way it is, not realizing that long before humans walked the earth, there was this cycle by which energy was created and then transformed, and a gas can become a liquid, which can become a solid, which can then melt and become a liquid again. But we humans, boy, we want to hang on to our physicality, and so death is terrifying. I'm afraid, I don't necessarily want to die, but it is that sort of inability to accept change and let go of form and structure that I think gets so many people so afraid.
Right. There's another passage earlier in the book about fear where you imagine this situation where someone goes into a dark forest. Do you remember that? And
oh gosh. No.
They're scared of the ghosts in the trees, kind of thing, and it's like they create a reality that's actually not there.
Right. Well, yeah. I think a lot of us do that when we're walking our car at night alone. But you're right. I mean, fear has the emotional power behind it to create us. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. What you are afraid of will come true if you don't stop that chain of giving your energy and your focus and your attention to the fear itself.
So how much of that is going to be actually manifested? How much of that powerful, because that's powerful, fear is always powerful energy that you put out there.
It is. So. I think it's more powerful than anything to us humans because, again, we're very trapped in our fear and limitations. Love should be the most powerful, and I think for a lot of people it is, but I think people feel fear more acutely. And it's the same thing with illness. I think what happens is, people may be saying, well, gosh, does that mean every single thing I'm afraid of is going to happen? No. It really depends on how much time and intention and focus and energy you put on something. But what tends to happen is if you're afraid of, let's say you're so afraid of getting into an abusive relationship, if your focus is on abusive relationships, that is literally what you're attracting. Instead of doing that, you need to be focusing on attracting and imagining and envisioning a great relationship. If you're afraid of getting cancer, you're living your life in a negative state of vibration. You're probably eating crappy. You're not sleeping because you're so afraid. You're just always stressed out, so there's cortisol racing through your body at all times. Yeah, you just might go and give yourself a great case of breast cancer or something. But if you could turn the focus back onto what you do want, and again, I'm not saying that I know for sure that you can create these things, but I've read enough cases and talked to enough people who have gotten sick who said, oh, I knew I did this to myself.
Mm-hmm.
I knew that I was living in a negative state, and my body decided to respond. And so, to me, that just seems like it makes sense.
Yeah, me too. So basically, the grid, we've got the physical aspect of the grid, which can be enhanced by the way I want to read a passage on that too. Let's see. Sacred geometry suggests that we can amplify the mystical powers of nature by aligning buildings with certain points in the landscape. Ley lines are a popular and contentious topic involving straight lines that were once ancient travel routes or pathways, yet were also given a spiritual significance related to the Chinese concept of feng shui. Feng shui is one of those very logical understanding of how to manipulate energy within a space,
right.
whether it be inside or out, and using that concept to the global Earth. That's pretty powerful stuff. But what I wanted to say is that, okay, so we've got the grid that's related to matter, Earth, buildings, etc. We've got the grid that's related to our vibration, our conscious and unconscious mass vibration, and then we've also got the idea that there are places in the grid that are super powered up and places in the grid that have holes in them.
Right.
What happens in those gaps?
Well, and I think it's just, again, observing nature. If you go outside, there are places, where there's a lot of buildings and noise where you really don't feel connected to nature. You don't feel great in those locations, but you might go out to the mountains and you're breathing in the air and you're in a totally natural setting where you feel so much more connected to life, so much more alive. I think that same concept works for the planet, that there are very natural, with totally scientific explanations behind it, places on our planet where the electromagnetic field may be a little bit of an anomaly. There may be meteorological conditions or seismic activity at work that is allowing for an interaction with our physiology, with our own bodies, our brain chemicals, hormones, what have you, that allow for people to have experiences that they might not have 100 feet away. And, that is just nature doing its thing. There's places where there are underground water sources where people claim that they feel differently than they do, where there are none. Our bodies are attuned to everything out there in nature, very finely attuned, except that we really ignore that now because we're so into our devices. But when we get back in touch with that, really, we come alive out in nature. I think we know the spots that should be avoided. We know spots that make us feel good, where the negative and positive ions might be operating and literally change our physiology. We love being near water because of the way that it interacts with us on a physiological level. And so I think that applies to things like ley lines and the understanding that if you build something on ground that feels sacred, and that doesn't necessarily mean religious, it just feels amplified, it feels more connected, that's how the people that live within that edifice or worship there are going to feel. And it's a lost art form that we no longer pay attention to when we build.
I went to Joshua Tree this summer and experienced standing on the edge of different vortices, and it was fascinating. I mean, they were very small vortices, and some of them had the body move like a pendulum, move clockwise, and some of them had it move anti-clockwise.
Right.
It was a phenomenal experience just to be, on a piece of ground, dirt, and your body was like moving like a pendulum one way or the other. I don't know what's underneath that.
You're just responding to the natural setting that you were in.
It was really amazing because when I channel, when I do my work and I channel, a lot of times I find myself working as a pendulum. My body transforms into this pendulum, rocking back and forth, going side by side. And depending on what it does, it will actually tell me what's going on in the body. Like, for example, if I'm rocking side to side, I'm listening and evaluating the information that's coming. When all of a sudden my body rocks back and forth, it's a yes, and then my nose are anti-clockwise circles. So I start going anti-clockwise when somehow the information disagrees with my body language. It's really interesting.
And I mean it's natural if you think about it. Long before we had buildings that we lived in and things to take our TVs and computers and whatnot, I think our bodies have two different kinds of intuition. One is a mental intuition that we use all the time, but I think we also have a physical intuition. And again, it picks up on places that are comfortable for us, and then also picks up on places that are dangerous, whether it's because of predators or, there's earthquakes or a volcano about to erupt. I think all of that stuff is inherent and built into us, but it's laying dormant now because most of us, unlike yourself where you've actively worked with that to keep it alive, to keep those feelings alive and active, most of us really are like dormant volcanoes. We just don't use it anymore.
Yeah, it's really paying attention to what your body tells you, It's actually one of the basis for my fridge therapy that I'm writing about. Listening to the body reaction when you open the fridge,
that's going to be good because I can relate to that. I mean, exactly. how we do not even listen to our bodies when we eat, and what we put in our bodies and how we treat them, and yet, talking earlier about disease and illness and not feeling well, those are ways our body is saying, hello, you're not paying attention to me. And if you don't, you just keep getting sicker and sicker until you finally do. I love how you hear all these wonderful stories of people that got cancer or had a heart attack or what have you, and said it was the best thing that ever happened because it woke me up. It really woke me up to what my body was trying to tell me, and I changed my life because of it.
Yeah, good job.
Yeah.
Kudos to those people who really, make an effort. It takes, like you said before, it takes action to actually engage in experience. One of the things that I noted that, again, you write often in your books is the notion of things come in threes.
Yeah.
And now we use, in metaphysics and esotericism, we use a lot of numerology, and 3 is one of the big numbers out there. 1, 2, 3. Things do come in threes. You relate that to the levels of reality. I believe that we can find in sacred texts or lores. I can't remember exactly what you were saying on it, but there's a picture of a tree, the world tree here called Yggdrasil.
Right.
Yeah. Links the levels of the gods, the elves, and Vamir that's the upper level. Then you've got the humans, giants, dark elves, and dwarves.
Right, the middle level, yeah.
And then the lower level, fire, and the realm of the dead.
Yeah, and that's repeated in shamanism and in a lot of religious beliefs, heaven, earth, or purgatory, and hell. And I think it really, there's, a lot of reasons why we love the number 3. First of all, it is the number that brings duality together. It unifies duality. So it's the perfect number of unification, of oneness and wholeness. But it also, if you look at these images like Yggdrasil and images from mythology and religion, what it shows is that there are 3 worlds that we sort of operate in, and that can be the subconscious, which really takes up most of our energy, consciousness, and then there's sort of a super consciousness state. So that 3 always kind of shows up, not just in the way that we as humans live and exist, but the way creation itself comes about, that you have, you've got the creator, which could be us, could be some force of whatever you want to call it. You've got an act of creation, and then you have the actual physical manifestation of creation itself. It's that 3-part process. And I think that's just ingrained in our subconsciousness as being very important. So we seek out the number 3. It really has a lot of meaning to us symbolically.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I got a bit lost because I was trying to find the geometrical shapes and the triangles within the grid, and I just zapped out for had a flash.
I think every number is important, and that's one of the things. Larry and I wrote the book 1111, the time prompt phenomenon. One of the reasons why we wrote that book was because of this phenomenon of people seeing numbers and time prompts and number sequences, and how symbolic they are. And what we learned by the time we got done with the book is it's because the universe speaks to us in number. Scientists of every type will tell you that the language of the universe is mathematical. Mm-hmm. And so we understand number and ratio and measurement on not just a literal level, but a very symbolic level as well. It's very important to us, even though we may not necessarily understand why.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, mathematics is really the core principle of alignment.
Right? And if you think about it, what do? Everything we do is measured out in some way. We use numbers more often than we think we do. So whatever it was or that created us, whether it was a force or an entity or just, consciousness, also uses measurement. It uses ratio. It uses very specific, proportions by which things are created and by which they're created differently from something else. The measurements and ratios required to create gravity are different from those required to create a human being.
Right. I want to tell everyone, I want to remind you guys, we're talking with Marie D. Jones. Please visit mariedjones.com, MariedJones.com, Marie D. Jones, and grab yourselves a copy of The Grid. It's a really good book, Christmas present. It's very easy to read, and it's full of really interesting parallels. We only have approximately 5 minutes left. And I'm going to finish it off with Marie by talking about the poltergeist enigma.
Oh, scary stuff. Yikes.
So you say one of the best examples of the alignment of external and internal triggers and mechanisms in the paranormal is the poltergeist.
Yeah. And for the field of the paranormal, if you look at poltergeist activity, what it is you've got a human agent, usually a teenager or someone going through a hormonal shift. You've got their very specific brain physiology that has to align with the environment to create some kind of outer physical manifestation. And what we know about poltergeist activity is that the same part of the brain that is at play with people who have grand mal seizures, epileptics have grand mal seizures, is at play in poltergeist activity. What this suggests is that if the activity in that part of the brain is strong enough, it can somehow manifest physical activity in the environment. And again, everything has to be in alignment. I do think ghosts, we have a similar situation where people can see apparitions if the environment that they're in, whether it be a haunted house or a graveyard or just a grocery store, is somehow matched up with their own physiology to enable them to perceive something in another reality. But poltergeist activity, you can actually see what happens to the environment.
That's a really interesting point that you bring up, because one of the things in the news these days is the fact that at Nelson Mandela's funeral official offices, the sign language translator messed up, and there's this whole thing where he explained he had, some form of psychological issues that he was going through, and all of a sudden in the crowd I saw angels, and kind of flipped out. Now that when you read such an article, you're like, oh my gosh, what is this? But when you're talking about mental alignments, mental connections, that this guy did or does have psychological problems, epilepsy of some sort, schizophrenia, I can't remember which one, but his brain waves were prone to giving him those hallucinations. He hallucinated and messed up.
Right.
It becomes
I think we all do that. I think we're all doing that in some respects.
Right. Yeah.
And I think that things like schizophrenia and some diseases are really more people experiencing other realities and not emotionally and mentally knowing how to deal with it. It could, it's anomalous. It's not something that maybe should be happening, but I don't think it necessarily means that someone is completely nuts.
Right. I totally agree. I mean, when you deal with autistic kids too, they have this ability to perceive in an alternate reality. It's not that they're not able to perceive anything. They do, but it's in a different way with a different perception. And I think that society is going to have to adapt itself to allow more of. It's like talking about those crystal, indigo, rainbow kids and ADD, ADHD, it's all a question of the evolution of perception and how it applies to the body functions and the energies that we're being influenced by. Yeah, totally. Wow. Well, thank you, Marie. This was terrific. Did you want to mention anything in particular regarding your book before we let you go?
Just that it's on sale everywhere books are sold, online, brick and mortar bookstores, and again, it's just a really cool introduction to the work that we've been doing, and I think people will really enjoy it.
Yeah. It's called The Grid, Exploring the Hidden Infrastructure of Reality by Marie D. Jones and Larry Flaxman. Are there any ghosts in your throat that you want to dump on Brilliant Essence so that you can go and feel all well again?
I don't know, I guess this will be the last time I talk to you before the New Year, so I should probably say Happy New Year.
Oh, thank you. Yes, Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays,
all that stuff,
and a very Happy New Year to everyone. Thank you all for listening in to Alternate Realities, and we will see you all next week. Thanks again. Have a great evening.